Hello, it's Anil,
This is Luke.
and this is the Leicester City 24-25 season preview. Hello, Luke, from down under. How are you doing?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
As I always say, when it's the opening day of the Premier League, I'm both excited and terrified in equal measure. It's one of those. At the time of recording, there's already been some games underway. Leicester are the last ones to go on Monday. We've already done our Spurs preview, and you can check that out on the channel. But this time around, we're going to be looking at the season as a whole. And we've got some material to prepare, as per always. Here we go. And I feel like these pictures are fairly indicative of what we might be thinking. But let's just kind of take it up high level, Luke. So let's rewind the clock back maybe 90 days. The game I'm particularly thinking of is that Preston North End game that we played away, game number 45 of the season. We put a fantastic display in, 3-0 win. We win the title. It felt therapeutic. It felt great, and everything was right and rosy. And now we find ourselves here. So, what do you make of what's happened in that short period of time, and how are you feeling right now as a Leicester fan?
Catastrophic. Full bath and the plug's been ripped. I feel that, look, we're really building upon something, and as we all know, we're feeling very positive and feeling very optimistic. I felt like that if there were no points deduction, I genuinely believed that we were going to finish anywhere between 12th and 15th, and we were going to build upon from that. Not saying straight away we were going to be contending and competing for Europe, but that was definitely in the back of my head. Enzo originally came out and said it was a 5-year, similar things he's saying at Chelsea, 5-year plan, and he probably meant that. That because we all know the board kind of lied to him a little bit, so he probably meant that. But we're here now. We've got Cooper. We've lost Dewsbury Hall. A lot of things have changed. Team looks different. Let's get into the cohesiveness in this team under Cooper and everything else that comes along with this season.
Yeah, I'm surprised you sound so rational when saying that, because as per the picture here, it really feels like, wow, what the hell happened? Like the rug's been pulled out from under us. I mean, I kind of agree with you. We did know that there was going to be a PSR points penalty coming up this season, but I felt the way that we were playing with Enzo, with KDH in the team, that you're right. I felt even with a points deduction, we had a good chance of staying up. Now, then it kind of made it seem like KDH was going to go anyway, and that made me worried. But I think the Enzo one is the one that, like, Chelsea, God, I mean, I don't know. They give us a lot of money for players like Chilwell, Drinkwater, and now KDH and our manager. But I really feel that losing the manager is absolutely huge. You can tell that he really won over the players and got them playing. And you mentioned in our Spurs preview about the body language between the players with the new manager. Maybe that's something they can sort out themselves, but that feels bad. And I think the other thing that we've got to say, which I think is the real kind of concern for everyone, is more the sort of lack of transfer activity. Now, we actually have made some signings. I'm going to come to some of those in a moment. But we do have a kid and Dewsbury Hall size gap in the team. Maybe we've got someone to replace him. We'll kind of get to that. So look, the objective of this show is we're going to tell you what we think is going to happen, what our predictions are, what our concerns are, what we may be positive about. But as we were doing this, some breaking news that's come through today, and that is that we have agreed a deal with Oliver Skipp. So who is Oliver Skipp? Ollie Skipp is a Spurs player, another one. It seems like we're picking up a lot of their players. He's a midfielder. I would call him more of a kind of deep-lying playmaker. Maybe he can also play a bit more forward with that. And it's rumoured that it's a 20 million deal with 5 million in variables, which is quite expensive. But he's 23 years old, homegrown player. And I think actually he really made his name for Norwich the last time they got promoted when he was actually in the Championship Team of the Year. And I'm going to show you some clips from that in a moment. So it's an interesting signing. I think it's good to at least get some business. What are your thoughts on this one?
Strange. It's another holding midfielder. Yeah, it's great. I've got several things I think about this. The first one is if we get relegated, Winks ain't staying. It's cover for Winks. Think of the money that we've spent on Ndidi. He's now our most expensive player. He's definitely going to be in the side. So what is this? Is this cover for Winks? Is this rotation? Is it depth? It's a lot of money for depth in the position that we're in right now. Is it one for the Championship? You tell me. But right now we need creativity and attacking midfielders. So to me, I'm happy we made a signing, but it's one I don't think is on the priority list.
Yeah, I find it interesting as well. So as we're talking, I'm just showing some clips from, the sort of stuff you can find on YouTube, and we're seeing some of the highlights from Oliver Skipp. And this is the season that he played for Norwich, and you can get a bit more feeling for his game. Now, I will say that I think what it could indicate is a bit of a team shape change, and we might go more to a 4-3-3. But I think what you said is very true. That I think Winks may have accepted one season in the Championship, but he sure as hell ain't going to accept another one. And it was interesting that sort of pre-match with Spurs, even Ange Postecoglou was sort of saying that, like, I didn't really get the opportunity to evaluate Harry Winks, and that if I did, kind of hinting that he might have kept him, which doesn't surprise me because the way that he plays, I think his skill set would have fit the way that they played. So I think Winks will be in demand if we were to get relegated. Look, I think 23 years old, that's really good. He's got experience in the Premier League. He's got experience in the Championship. He's a good player. I can tell you that got a few friends that are Spurs supporters, and they said that during the sort of Conte and Nuno period, Skipp was getting into the team, and a lot of people thought he might even end up becoming like the club captain in the future. So they really had quite high hopes for him. In the end, it hasn't ended up that way. He got a bit of an injury and then found it hard to get back into the team and a sort of style change. But I think there's a lot to like here. And so what we're seeing here is he's got some good tackling. He's got a good range of passing. He's got the ability to kind of shift around. I mean, look at that. It's a really nice ball over the top to someone. Yeah, you're right. I think he's not the sort of person that you'd expect to be the assist, but he is the sort of person that can do a pre-assist. I think there's a lot of, obviously, talk about the fee because 20 million is a lot. What I would say, though, is if you look at the fees for players in the Premier League, that's about the going rate. Like, I mean, Brighton just paid 40 million for Jorginho Rutter from Leeds, who I think is also a good player, but that is a lot of money. Now, fair play, you could say, yeah, but we don't have to buy players from the Premier League or England, right? You are allowed to buy players from abroad, duh. And that is 100% true. But I do wonder if Steve Cooper, particularly at his time in Forest, that he might think that, the issue with the foreign signings is that when they come off, they can be brilliant, but the sort of range in between how good and bad they can be massive. Do you know what I mean? Whereas if you sign someone from the English league, sure, they might not have the high ceiling, but you know what you're going to get kind of thing. And I think if you look at the clips here, what I'm saying is I see at minimum a really solid player. And I would expect this guy, given that he's 23 years old, I think we can expect Oliver Skipp to be part of the team, providing this signing goes through, because Neil made a video about Adam Lozek earlier in the week, and I felt really sorry for him because that deal got gazumped. But assuming that we do sign him, he's a sort of player that I think will probably be a mainstay for probably 4 to 5 years, which is pretty important. And that might be one of the big reasons. And actually, one thing I would say is why has it taken so long for us to sign him? And my feeling on that is that I actually think that he had been linked with Leeds. And I've got a feeling that Leeds made the bid and Leicester were like, okay, let's not mess about now. We need to get some signings in. We know that this is a good player. And I would say a few other things as well. I feel like this is now the first time that I feel I am seeing some sort of transfer strategy from the club. So I do feel that in general, the signings that we've made, the permanent ones at least, they're players that will play for us now. But if we do get relegated, they will stay with us in the relegation season. Because I think Oliver Skipp, Caleb Okoli, Bobby Reid, they will all stay with us in the Championship. And I think if we were to go down to the Championship again, those players would be pretty strong. Like Skipp, like I said, already made Team of the Year. So that could be something that we see. But look, I've brought up a team lineup, and I wanted to speak to you about this because I think that if you're spending 20 million on a player, I mean, spoilers, that player's not going to be on the bench, right? I think he's going to be coming into the team. And then how would we get into the team? And you literally just said to me, and I agree, you said, well, Wilfred Ndidi's just signed a new contract. He might be the highest paid player in the club. So if that's the case, he's got to be in the team too. So how are we going to accommodate these? And so I suspect that we might be going more for the 4-3-3, at least in some games. We did try this already. We definitely played this way against Shrewsbury, where we had like Sumare and Ndidi, Winks all playing together. And one of the two was kind of taking it in turns to kind of push up. And I could see that. Now, to be fair, I mean, if I put that to you, I could probably guess, but what would be your main concern with a team that played 4-3-3 like this?
My main concern is there's no creativity in that you've got basically 3 holding midfielders running in midfield. So it's a very defensive setup. And you've already alluded to playing counter-attacking football under Cooper. But the biggest one as well is like you talk about the amount of wages that we've spent on Wilfred and Ndidi, so he's obviously going to be starting. But then we've just gone and got Boyanote on loan. So what's the point of getting him out on loan if he's not even going to feature for the time that he's here, because there's no obligation to buy? But the biggest one, as I just said, was the creativity. Yes, Harry Winks, very, very deep line playmaker, setting things up. Vardy's still not available, so that could be Cannon up front. We don't know. Skip, very, very similar to Harry Winks, younger, but very, very good at playing under pressure, picking out a very decent pass. So they're very actually quite similar players. Obviously, Winks is a lot more advanced and a lot more experienced, but one for the future for sure. So look, don't get me wrong, great signing. But are any of those three players in the midfield there people to take their man on and take progressive balls forward?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's exactly what people are saying. And I think that's the concern. I feel like people aren't necessarily unhappy with this signing, but they're more like, do you not see what the problem was during pre-season? We couldn't score for Toffee. How is that going to help us? However, what I would say is that I think we're trying to build a squad, not just the team. So even though I've put this out there, this is not necessarily the team that would play week in, week out. It's what would play against certain games. But the other thing I would say is that, you know, in the Premier League, you're going to be playing against teams. And as I'll kind of show you later, the reality is that our overall squad quality, if you look at it in terms of how much each player is worth, and I think that's an objective way to look at it, our squad is either the second or third worst in the entire division, right? That's like not even an opinion. That's if you just use like player value. You know, whether that's true or not, that's up for debate. So if you take that into account, that most teams are better than you, the reality is that you're going to be up against it in most games. And what that means is that you might not necessarily have to be the protagonist, right? You don't necessarily have to attack these teams, but you need to be competitive. So I agree that when I see a team like this, it screams very little creativity whatsoever. But I would say that midfield three is very competitive, and it gives you an element. And I think it's going to be able to compete with most teams in the league. I think your Arsenals and Man Cities, maybe Liverpool's, are going to overrun you because they've just got real quality and give you the runabout. But for example, if that team lined up against Spurs, you know, I think it would be difficult for Spurs to break it down, is what I'm saying. For sure, I'm not necessarily saying we're going to create a ton, but I think we'd at least be in the game. And I think you've got to be in it to win it, as you say, right? And then kind of take it forward. And then you would be, you know, Liverpool under Klopp, they changed it in the last couple of seasons, but he had some of his best success with a midfield of Jordan Henderson, Gini Wijnaldum, and James Milner. And none of those were particularly creative, and their creativity came from their two fullbacks and their front three. Now, what I would say with our fullbacks is that, like, you know, this is why in my lineup I put Justin there over Christensen, because I'm not really impressed with Christensen from an attacking point of view. Ricardo, I definitely am, but Cooper doesn't seem to like him. But I've got a feeling he might find his way back into the team. The two wingers are good. I mean, the striker, Vardy, we don't even know if he's going to start in the next month. So that is definitely a big problem. But I am saying that overall, I could see that actually giving us a chance, whether or not we believe in Cooper or not. Now, we'll come to the other players, but that's what I like, right? Is that that's a decent-ish lineup. You know, I don't think that's the worst, you know, creative or not. I don't think, for example, I think that team is stronger than what Sheffield United put out last year, maybe even Luton, maybe not necessarily Burnley, but they went for young players. And we have other players that we can go through. So that's Oliver Skip. So let's talk about some of the other ones. So you mentioned him already. So let's go to someone who we're going to have a lot of fun trying to pronounce his name this year. But I believe it's Facundo Buonanotte. We might just call him Facundo for short. And he's 19 years old, left-footed, and he's a very exciting player. So I'm going to play some clips while we talk about him. And this is like from his clips at Brighton. And despite him being 19 years old, he's already got 4 international caps for Argentina. It was extremely highly rated. Feyenoord, it looked like were going to sign him on loan for this season, but instead we managed to get him. And Feyenoord, I think they might even be in the Champions League. I mean, look at this. Absolute rocket he's just hammered in there from 25 yards. I mean, he's got the techers. There's no doubt about it. My understanding is he's graceful. He's got really good technique. I understand that he's also a really good presser, and he's got very good stats for that. I believe he's quite poor aerially, but I think in terms of being a technician, he's good. And look at that. I mean, this is someone who's able to provide the sort of passing between the lines, dropping into the channels. You can see he's operating very centrally in a lot of these clips as well. rather than coming out on the wing. So, maybe this is the KDH replacement. He might not be here for a long time. He might only be here for a good time. But what are your thoughts on this player?
Okay. My thoughts on this player are this. You're going to like this. I think you and I are both going to need not a swear jar, but an Enzo jar. But the very, very beginning of the show, you said to me that, losing the manager was the most catastrophic thing for us, and then the Keenan Dewsbury Hall. And I'll tell you exactly why, because Enzo stick and played to a system. So if we still had roughly the same squad, right, and we had Enzo, we're going to have a system. And this is the guy that would perfectly slot into that Enzo ball system under Keenan Dewsbury Hall, left-footed, high pressing 8. So I absolutely think that this is a great player to have. It's a shame that there is no obligation to buy. Brighton are definitely keeping one eye on him. They probably don't want to let him go. Now, is he motivated? He obviously wants more minutes of football. He's here. Let's see what he can do. But where he slots in, is he going to be playing that 10 role? I think so. So it remains to be seen, mate. I don't think he'll feature. I think he'll probably come on off the bench against Tottenham is my prediction. What is yours? Do you think he gets thrust in or not?
I think he'll actually start. I think had we have signed Oliver Skip 2 weeks ago, he wouldn't. But I think because we haven't, he will be thrust straight into it. And it'll be interesting to see how he does. But I think, as per your point, I feel what will happen is it will depend on the opposition that we play. So, yeah, look, when you're playing Spurs, who's a top 5 team, you're going to be up against it. You might not play him in a game like that. But if you're at home, the second game, we're going to be playing Fulham. That's the game that I think you'd put him in. I think every time you're thinking there's an opportunity that we might get something out of here, or we're expected to, like especially if we're at home, I can see him lining up and playing. And look, he'll be competing with other players in the team. And, we don't know how it goes. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised look, some of these clips are very exciting. I really wouldn't be surprised if, in terms of just pure technique, he's the most technical player in the entire squad. It really wouldn't surprise me. I think he does need to add some more end product to his game, but that's obviously what he's come here for, and we'll see. And yeah, I think everyone's fair to say, what we don't want to do is be developing players from another team. But the way that I look at it is perhaps if you look at maybe Kante, when he played for us, he only basically was here for a season. So in some ways, we sort of loaned him for a season, if that makes sense. Now, I know we obviously made a lot of money on it. We made like a 25 million profit. But at the same time, look at players like Sumare and Daka. Perhaps you could look at those players and say, do you know what? If instead of buying them, we'd have loaned players, it might be better. And it might be something that we shouldn't feel so afraid of in the future of utilizing that market, because it's a better way in terms of business. So I have to say, I'm very excited to see him. They do say don't fall in love with loan players. But I tell you what, we fell in love with Yuri Tielemans, and then he signed permanently. We fell in love with Robert Huth. He signed permanently. We fell in love with Abdul Fattah. He signed permanently. It's not impossible. I think you're right to say that Buonanotte, if he has like a really good season and Leicester stay up, they might be asking like 45, 50 million, and that might price us out of it. But, there is that kind of in-between road where, he's sort of affordable but not crazy. So we'll see. And look, if he's a flop, nothing ventured, nothing lost sort of thing. So I actually think that's a good bit of business, and excited to see him. Perhaps his age is a bit young. Maybe you'd want someone who could hit the ground running. But that leads me nicely on to the next person on my screen. So another bit of permanent business that we did early on was Bobby de Cordova-Reid. I'm just going to call him Bobby Reid. I apologise to the player. I'm sorry, it's a bit of a mouthful. I've got a difficult surname myself. There's a reason why people just call me Anil. So we're going to talk about Bobby Reid. And he's joined us from Fulham. And look, I'll get your thoughts on this one. I'm just going to play some clips in the background. This was a thank you video that Fulham put together for his time with them at the club. And what do you make of Bobby Reid?
I don't like it. And purely I'll tell you why, because you just mentioned before, I can see for teams like this, we would shape up like this or that, but I would rather get one system down packed and right and working before we try about 3 or 4 different systems and then confuse our players anymore and then get them even more disgruntled than they possibly already are. Now, and then the thing to add on to that is Cordova-Reid. What would you do? Would you call him an attacking midfielder, a left winger, a striker, or a utility player? Probably the latter. And if you have something where we're already worrying about creativity or a lack of identity, and then you throw in a utility player that's playing in different positions, that's not cohesive to me. And I appreciate that you need those sorts of players in your squad. I think it's a little bit on the cheap. And again, I would like to be wrong about this and make the lad look good. But for me, it doesn't look like he has a set role. And every time I've seen him feature in the preseason friendly. So what are your thoughts? Am I being harsh or do you agree?
I think you're being pretty harsh, to be honest. I will defend you in one way and say that in pre-season he has not looked great. I wouldn't necessarily say he's made any mistakes, which another player will come on to in a moment has, but equally he hasn't really sort of grabbed the game by the scruff of the neck. And like, I'm looking at these clips, and I certainly don't remember him doing anything like this in pre-season. But you know what? Every time I've seen Fulham play in the Premier League, he's looked quite good, to be honest with you. And he's always been one of those like, oh, I wonder where they found him or how they got him. He's looked half decent. And you know what I will say is I think given his age right away, and he had a good season last season. I think he got like something like 6 goals, 6 assists. That's for the future. Well, what about now? The future isn't now. The future is the future. So that's something to be said. I think my bigger concern is more that like if you've been given a 3-year deal at his age, what's he going to be like in the last year of his contract? You know, he could be just an expensive player on high wages that you can't shift, and it's going to be difficult to loan him out. So that I think would be the fear. But I think for 2 seasons, it's a pretty good deal. And I do think that if we went down again, like I say, I think he would probably be very effective in the lower divisions. And I think he will make an impact now. And I think at first, I would be worried if we were starting with Reed. But given that I think he won't be a starter, but he will be a rotation option, that's not a bad thing. You've got to remember, you can make 5 subs. So the players that come on for the last 30, you can win games. Leicester scored a lot of goals last season in the last 30 minutes of games when we were wearing teams down. Now, this time round, I think we're going to be more the team that gets worn down rather than doing the wearing down. But bringing a player on who's fresh, who can press from the front and has got the ability to finish, I wouldn't turn my eyes up on that. So I think for free, it could be okay. But I will fully admit that come the end of the season, we might be talking and Luke's looking at me going, I told you, Anil, I told you he was terrible and you didn't believe me. So let's see how that one goes. But let's move on then to another one that we signed. And look, I don't think it's necessarily a surprise that we signed a centre-back, but maybe the type of centre-back that we signed was a bit unusual. So we signed Caleb Okoli from Atalanta, and I believe this was for 15 million euros, so about 12 million pounds. And yeah, he has been playing some of the games in pre-season. He's not left-footed. That's the thing that surprised me. I did think after Callum Doyle left that we would go for a left-footed centre-back. We have seen Caleb play on the left-hand side. We've also seen him use his left foot, to be fair. But, you know, he's not, you know, like one of those like truly ambidextrous players or someone that's, you know, naturally left-footed. But I'm going to play some clips in the background and you tell me what have you made of Caleb Okoli and what you're expecting from him this season.
I feel like I need to see. I could sound harsh again, and as a centre back, he's one player that I think deserves and warrants a little bit more time before I start whinging, complaining about him. But if I'm just taking it from what I've seen so far, it's a stupid buy. We had that many centre backs as it is. Again, it's one of those things where I'm like, why? I agree with you with the left-footed centre back. I definitely thought that was something that was going to come. And something that we're actively looking for. JJ did a brilliant job, but like he obviously in terms of attack, it left a little bit of a void, particularly when we were pressing. But Okoli, many times I've seen him well out of position. His ball distribution's been poor, but it's also I've seen a few times where it's been not too bad. So I will give him. I want to see him have like a decent, him mark like maybe someone like Solanke or like one of the big like high end like strikers, and let's see how he does matching up on some of these players before I throw him under the bus anymore. But he looks physical. We need that, but we've got that a little bit in phase. But what are your thoughts? So for me, it just to wrap it up and stop waffling on, I just think it was an unnecessary buy into what we need right now.
Yeah, I think those would be my thoughts as well. And I think even if it was considered a necessary buy, I'm not sure on this player. He looks way too raw for me. I think a really interesting way of judging players is to ask fans from existing clubs what you think of him. And for example, all of the other players, including Bobby Reed, that I've mentioned, the clubs that have sold them have actually said that they're good players. Like Spurs say that Oliver Skipp's a good player. Unfortunately, not gets a first team. Maybe not quite right for them now, but he's a very good player. They said the same about Winks. Brighton are really big on Buonanotte, and didn't want him to go with a permanent option. So they're glad that hasn't happened, for example. Bobby Reed, the Fulham fans wanted to keep him. They understand why he went, but it's not like they were looking for him to desperately go. With Okoli, the Atalanta fans more were like, wow, Premier League, only they would spend 15 million euros on a player like Okoli. That's not really something you want to hear. Looking at the clips, I can see why we've got him. I think, Enzo did say last season that one problem with our back three is that not one of them, not Callum Doyle, not Vestergaard, not Fast, is really fast. And I think that's why towards the end he started putting JJ in, because otherwise on transition you're going to get caught out. So that could be one reason that we've gone for him. He's also very tall. Like, you do look at a lot of his tackles and he's a strong guy. He's definitely got a physicality. You would hope he gets to push people around from corners. But I think that on the ball he's not looked good. And what I'm going to play now in the background is this is literally from the friendly that we played against Lens. So this is the first goal that we conceded. This is the stuff of nightmares again. But what we're seeing here again is the ball gets headed back to him from Christensen. He's got it. He's got a fairly simple pass to make. It gets intercepted. Well, that can happen. But his second one, that's a really poor touch. He's put a player through, and this leads to a corner. But you can see it's just like a calamity of errors. And then, but even here, he looks a bit lost. He's not like actively engaging his man. Now he's at least pushing out, and he is more tighter with his man. But yeah, there's some real areas of concern there. And then the next one I've got is, I think, your all-time favourite, which is this next one. Yeah, this is the next one where he does his positioning, which is what you've mentioned. And I don't really know what to say here. It's got to be one of the strangest cases of defending I've ever seen. Here we have a back four. Maybe he had an injury or something. Here he comes, number 5.
Where's he come from?
Yeah.
Water break.
Maybe from the touchline. But I mean, that's not a good sign. And I'd also say that if you are a defender and you see it there, you should really be breaking your neck to get there. He's supposedly a fast player. Look, like I say, young players, you give them time, but it concerns me that someone like that is being thought of as slotting into the team right away. I think, if you compare it to other centre-halves that we've signed in the past, like Harry Maguire, he looked good from game one. Wesley Fofana was ridiculous. He looked incredible from game one. Soyuncu was an interesting one. I remember, had his debut, I think, against Huddersfield, where he looked good, and then he wasn't used for a bit, and he wasn't used for his first season at all. But then the second season, Maguire went, and I think Brendan was even looking for another centre-half, but he decided to give him a run out, and then he had an elite season that year. He was in the team of the year even, pocketing some of the best players in the league. He was fantastic. Then it kind of went a bit sour for him. I think maybe he was looking for a move away, but he looked good too. Conversely, I mean, I don't want to mock the Aussies here, but I always felt that Harry Souttar just didn't look like a Premier League player. He looked nervous from game one. I heard he's doing well for Sheffield United, but that is in the Championship. Maybe he's okay, but I never thought he was going to be like a truly elite kind of Premier League defender. And I guess Okoli, I don't know, let's come to it, but I'm not feeling too bullish on Okoli, to be honest with you. But to be fair, as I mentioned, he could be a player that's more like he could develop. Maybe he's not expected to start games all the time this season. And if we do go down, he could be good there. But I think we will see him in the lineup, and I think he might be someone that comes under some flack. So that's one to keep an eye out on. So let's go then for one more player that we've signed, and this is Michael Golding, 17-year-old from Chelsea. I'll play some clips here, and something that's very interesting with these clips is this is all from the kind of youth level. So, this is a guy that actually, I believe, has not played any Premier League football. I think he's only had 14 minutes in the Cup for Chelsea. That said, I would say that the Cobham Academy, they do know how to produce players. It's rare that you get a Chelsea player that doesn't end up in the Premier League or absolute worst top-end Championship. And he was very highly rated as one of their best central attacking midfielders. And we're seeing here someone that can use left foot, right foot. He's wearing the 10 at times, which, they don't just give that shirt out to anybody, Luke. I certainly have never been given the 10, put it that way, as a player on a football pitch. And I like what I see here. What are your thoughts on Michael Golding?
I like what I see too, and I agree with everything that you just said. But for me, for how little we've seen him feature in pre-season and his age and experience, I think it's a waste, particularly for the money that we paid to not send him out on loan. I hate talking defeated, but if we were to go down, if he's not going to feature that much, and we've spent that money on him for his age, and let's say we are to get relegated, if we were to, one, loan him out to a championship side and we get relegated, he's going to be familiar with the league and he's going to have the minutes in like proper men's football. B, let's say we loan him out, he does like a Carvalho and destroys the championship, and it hits January and things are looking a bit grim. We call him back like, Chelsea did of Cassidy, except we play him. Then I think that's a much better option. And I think the same can be said for the likes of Will Alves. But keeping it on topic with Golding, I would like to see him get a loan move. I think it's too late. I think it would be better for his development, for his play, which therefore is better for us. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I feel like I owe you an apology. I was convinced at the start of pre-season that we might see a lot of him and he might be used as a kind of auxiliary left cam. But the fact that we only really saw him get a few minutes, he looked a bit kind of shy and nervous. Understandable. He's only a young lad. He's not ready. And I like what I see, but he's got, he's one for 2 or 3 years down the line. So I agree, put him out on loan, see what he can do, build his confidence, get him playing. That's what you really need. You need minutes in the tank. So I think, let's be honest, he was signed for PSR to help Chelsea. It was a little bit of everyone helping one another out. That's where we are. And yeah, so that's another one that I think you can understand. It's just more for the accounting books rather than the necessary one for the team. So look, before I kind of go into like where we're going to look at positions and probably the impending battle that's coming our way, I wanted to ask you then, look, the window's still got 2 weeks open. What are you hoping we see in the rest of the window? Where do you think we're short? And I'm not saying we'll play this team, but I've just brought up, a potential 4-3-3 minus Buonanotte and Reed. What would you like to see?
I would like to see, look, to be honest with you, I wasn't all that worried about a striker before, but I am definitely now that Vardy and both Dak are injured. So I want an attacking midfielder and someone like the likes and a striker as well. So they're the most two crucial parts that I think that we need. Vardy could get injured again. We don't know about Daka. Maybe he's a while. So as it stands, I've got Cannon and Mavididi, who's not an out-and-out striker. We know he can do it, but he's, in my opinion, he's best out wide, and we've already discussed that. So an attacking like midfielder, someone like the likes of, for example, is he Premier League level? We don't know, but someone like Elias Chair, someone that's, low ball center of gravity, takes his man on, decent of his dribbling, someone like Madison, that can creatively progress the ball up the pitch, beat his man, and put a ball on someone. That's someone that I would like to see.
Do you not think that's Buonanotte, or do you think we need additional or someone who's a bit more ready?
I do think it's Buonanotte, spot on, but I also think that we need someone that's either on a permanent basis that we can count on for the following season and also cover, because if it is Buonanotte, it's only him and he could get injured. So if he gets injured, then what? All the cover that we have on those positions are the young lads like the likes of Will Alves, Golding, who else maybe could have Reed plays in that position. But I genuinely believe that we need strengthening on that. We've just strengthened in centre backs, which we didn't really need, and now holding midfielders. Where's the creativity and the cover and depth?
I listen. I agree with you. I don't disagree. We were linked with Wilfried Zaha. He is not quite that player, or is he that player? I wonder. What would you think of someone like that?
I think he would have been good for a season, maybe on loan, but for the wages they wanted, it was stupid. And I definitely think it would have been great. I would have loved to have had him as well, mate, but I just think that they were asking too much. And I think there's other players out there of that caliber for less money.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I've got to say, I'm not going to lie. I'm a very big Zaha fan. For me, the main reason I'm such a fan is I just feel of all the players that we've kind of signed so far, maybe Skip fits into this category a little bit, but you're looking for that player that can just come in immediately and you could be confident they're going to have an impact. That's maybe what I feel we're missing. Interesting enough with Chelsea, they signed Dewsbury Hall, and I kind of feel like if you're playing the Enzo system, then playing Dewsbury Hall is the best signing you can make because he's the best player in that system. So for us, I just feel that this could be the case of the striker as well. But I think, look, right now, I'm not feeling too positive about our chances this season. But I feel like if we did sign someone like that, who's just going to come in right away and you're like, hello, just someone that is good, it would really add a lot. So to be honest with you, even if it was just for a season, absolutely would take Zaha. And if it's not Zaha, I was trying to think about this in my head, like who else is actually available that we could get. I'm not sure. Maybe it's another loan player or something from Chelsea, but you know what I mean? There's not too many out there. And, you know, the thing was hard because he might be 31, but I mean, he knows what it's all about. This is the thing, like Buonanotte could be good, but you're signing potential, not the ready-made article. That's what I'm after. So, look, striker, I agree as well. And it'll be interesting to see who we get there. So who do you think we could even get in those two positions?
What's the little solid turtle guy's name from Switzerland that's now a free agent? I think he was playing in the MLS before.
Oh, he's signed already, unfortunately, Zedran
He has?
Shaqiri. Yeah, he's gone
That's
back
the
to
one, yeah.
Switzerland for Basel.
Okay, no,
I can see you thinking there. I think he might be a bit past it, if I'm being honest.
I
But
think so too.
I do see where you're coming from there, though. To be honest, I sort of see the angle. You know, other ones I can think of in the other positions. I mean, we've been linked with a Greek striker, Fotis Ioannidis from Panathinaikos. Could happen. That's a bit of an unproven signing. Tammy Abraham from Roma. I wouldn't be surprised if you saw him rock up on loan here. I could see Eddie Nketiah even turning up on loan at Leicester as well. I'll be honest, I feel he's a little bit overrated, but better than what we've got probably right now, given the fact that Daka's going to be out. I'm not really sure for the kind of, yes, you say impact player who can drive from deep, progressive balls and runs. I'm really struggling to be honest with you, who we can maybe
Lawrence
get.
Shanklin.
I know you love Lawrence Shanklin from Hearts, who those who don't know, has got good stats, didn't really have the best Euros. I hope that we don't see Lawrence Shanklin, if I'm being honest. Matt O'Reilly from Celtic, now that would be an amazing signing, but I don't see us getting him, especially if we spent this money on Oliver Skip. Look, I'm not sure, but what I will say is that I do still expect to see probably two more signings, if only on loan. I think we will do that, and that might give us a bit better chance because I've got to say, coming into this Spurs game, the worry is just that like the squad is just very kind of thin, and it didn't really fill me with confidence. So I tell you what, let's kind of get to it, right? So we've talked about the squad, but I think we haven't really talked about how we think the season's going to go, or even the new manager we haven't really talked about. So we'll talk about both of those things. So what I've brought up here is I've brought the bottom half of the Premier League table from last season. So last season, it was the three promoted teams that went down. Sheffield United were absolutely awful. They conceded 104 goals. That's absolutely insane. Burnley were a surprise, I think. I think a lot of people thought they would do a lot better, even if they might get relegated. And Luton was kind of just surprised. But even Luton were 6 points away from safety, and Nottingham Forest actually suffered a points deduction. So it wasn't even really that close. Even in fact, Everton also had a 10-point deduction and still were really safe on 40 points. But if we're looking at who's going to be in the mix here, so you had Crystal Palace in 10th, you had Brighton in 11th. I think given how much they've spent, I would be surprised if they're anywhere near the bottom this season. You got Bournemouth, Fulham, Wolves, Everton, Brentford, Forest. And then, of course, you've got the three teams that have come up, which is Leicester City, Ipswich Town, and Southampton. So notice how I haven't put any of the top half. I think we can both comprehensively say that no one is expecting a top half finish. So what do you think the season has in store for us? What's the challenge, and how are you feeling?
The challenge is getting the team to believe in whatever you think Cooper's system is and have that, that band of brothers and that camaraderie. I think that's quite important. Mm-hmm. And I don't see that right now. The teams I think that if we get off to a very, very poor start with even without a points deduction, I think some hard and tough questions need to be answered about, we'll get into it later, what a deadline is for how much time do we give Cooper, because in my opinion, we cannot wait to pull the trigger like we did of Rodgers. We paid a dire consequence, and I don't want to repeat that again. So looking at what we've got here, and I fully expect Southampton to be in the bottom three with us. Yes, I think we can both agree on that, particularly the way that they play. Teams that I can potentially see drop Wolves. Wolves are one of them. Mm-hmm. Bournemouth, I think, will be okay. Fulham, I think, will be okay. Everton, asterisk for sure. That's a manager that I can see going if he goes poorly. I think Sean Dyche has done some decent Brexit ball and done all right for them, but I think this might be the season it comes undone for him. Let's wait and see. Mm-hmm. Brentford, do you think Tony's still going to be there at the end of the transfer window?
That's impossible to say, isn't it? I'll be honest.
Yeah.
I'm very surprised he's still there because even though he's, I think, 28 and he's only got a year left on his contract, so perhaps teams are waiting to get him next year, he's as kind of proven and ready to go as he could do. Like Spurs went for Solanke, but they could have gone for Tony. I think Solanke is the better signing in terms of the long potential, like a 5-year deal. But if you ask me right now to line up for a game tomorrow, who I'd put in my team, Solanke or Tony, I would go Ivan Tony. I've heard he is maybe a bit of a prick, pardon my language, not the nicest guy, but I think he knows how to bag and he's got that ice cold composure. So we'll see. The thing is with Brentford is they did sign a replacement for £37 million, but that replacement, he scored twice and then he also got injured on his debut, and the injury is severe enough that he won't play for the rest of this year, but he will be back in 2025. So they might be a bit under pressure there, and that could be a problem. I do kind of agree, though, that with Brentford, if they don't have Tony, I think they're in trouble. If they have him, I don't know, they might still be in trouble, to be honest with you. They're a tough one. I think what they're good at, though, Brentford, is they seem to be a good team at picking up the points against the other teams in the bottom 5, if that makes sense, but don't get much from the ones above it. Probably someone will go in the comments and show that I'm completely wrong, but I get that kind of perception from them. But I could see them dropping. I think, yeah, the 3 there, unsurprisingly, they're near the bottom. So Forest, Brentford, Everton. I think those ones they could drop. Wolves could drop as well. I think as it stands, I wouldn't have any of them. But, there's always like a team that considerably underperforms. And unfortunately, we were that team 2 seasons ago. You can get onto a bad run early. It's not impossible, but I do think that most of these teams have got quite strong squads and players. Looking at them, Forest, they brought in Nuno. He's quite a pragmatic coach. I kind of would back him to get enough points. Dyche, the same. Thomas Frank's a good manager. I think this is kind of the problem, is that I'll kind of move it on. But, I think one thing to take into account is who is the person in charge and what are they bringing. And, that's the thing, is that these days the Premier League might as well be called the Super League. You've got such crazy managers. Like I think Unai Emery at Aston Villa is probably the biggest indicator of that, but it's always drawn like the elite coaches. So we have Steve Cooper. Now, I think Cooper did do a very good job for Forest. He got them promoted, kept them in the Premier League under difficult circumstances, but ultimately he was sacked near the end of last season because they were scared that they could go down, and they brought Nuno in. I think they did about the same, but ultimately they did stay up. We've seen him now in pre-season. We'll obviously give him a chance, but I do know that you have some quite strong opinions on Steve Cooper. So why don't you tell me what you think about Steve Cooper and how that relates to our chances of staying in the Premier League this year?
What frustrates me is, again, like starting with you saying, oh, he did well, he avoided relegation. That's very defeated, in my opinion. We should never have been relegated that season. We all know it. They hung on by the skin of their teeth. I don't want to be hanging on, because let's say you hang on, you just survive by that one season. Well, what happened the following season? Well, he got sacked because there was no improvement. He did decent in the Championship, but we're not in the Championship. We're in the Premier League. So you want to see some kind of trajectory where you are going up in somewhat of an ascension of building upon something. We're built upon nothing. Again, I know it's only preseason, but we just went 3 games of no identity and no goals. And we just got absolutely battered in that last game. Players didn't look happy. Back to body language. Everyone says, oh, he's a nice guy and he's good at developing youth. Yeah, sure. Maybe he's good at developing youth when he had, England, with some of the best cream of the crop in the whole world. And also developing youth. What does that translate to? Where's the system? What is that going to be utilized in? Yeah, you might make someone decent. You might get a decent turnover and a wage if you were to sell them. But for me, it's always about the team and how we play and what are we building towards. Right now, I don't know what we're building towards. It's all about trying to survive and hang on. And I don't like that, because that makes me feel defeated. And I'm going to put another $5 in the Enzo jar here. I didn't feel that way. I felt like, cool, let's see what happens when teams are not going to sit back and drop back and play a low block and park the bus. Teams are going to come at us, cool, let's see us play at the back, because I reckon we're going to carve some and surprise some teams. But I know I've ranted a little bit, but I know it's negative. The man does not fill me with confidence. I think we've gone on the cheap, trying to hang on and thinking about the worst case scenario, which I can appreciate, which is relegation. But at the same time, you have to give yourself a fighting chance instead of this always thinking, what if we've got to be ready for this? There has to be in terms of player signings and manager. Potter didn't want to come. We were linked with Corberan. I don't know how much of that was valid, if it was just us and other supporters saying they wanted him. But in my opinion, it's been a poor appointment. And I personally give him anywhere in the neighborhood of 4 to 6 weeks, 6 games. And if we lose 5 of them, pay the money, get him gone. Don't make the same mistakes he did of Rodgers. Get someone in that like has an identity and has a style and can get these players behind him.
Very damning words. I think there's a lot that I could cut up there and turn into YouTube shorts. I wouldn't necessarily disagree. I think, look, just let's try and be objective here. I think if you looked at all of the teams in the Premier League, there is an argument to say that he is amongst the worst managers. That's not being unfair. It's just because that's the caliber. Most of these other managers, you've got people like, who's worse than him? Gary O'Neill at Wolves, maybe you could say, but he has kept his team up and did a good job. Like Marco Silva won the championship. Andre Iriola, I don't think his first name's Andre, but Iriola at Bournemouth was really highly rated in Spain. The Brighton manager won the league with St. Pauli in Bundesliga 2, very highly rated. Palace have Glasner, who won the Europa League with Frankfurt. Ipswich, Kieran McKenna's got them back-to-back promotions, never been done in like 20 years, absolutely outstanding. Maybe Russell Martin's worse, to be fair. So, maybe you could say that. But, Thomas Frank, Sean Dyche, Nuno Espirito Santos, they're probably better managers. As you say, it does feel like we've got on the cheap. And, you said he's a nice guy. There is that old saying that nice guys finish last. So I really hope that's wrong. I do, though, genuinely think that you get what you pay for. And I think it has been shown statistically. And look, I'm going to start bringing this up while we're talking. But what tends to happen is that the value of the squad or the wages that you pay is indicative of your final league position. So here I've got Brentford, and their squad is worth over 400 million. Everton, over 300 million. Ipswich is the cheapest at 100 million. So that's why probably a lot of people expect them to go down. Southampton, 230 million. Forest, 360 million. And they're going to sign more players, they will. Wolves, 360 million. Leicester squad, as it stands, 200 million. Let's imagine Skip comes in, that brings us up to 220. Maybe we'll get some more. But I guess my point is that, that makes us one of the bottom 3 squads in the division. And we've got a manager who isn't that experienced. And actually, while I'm going through this, we've got Thomas Frank, been in charge for over 5 years. Sean Dyche, over a year and a half. And of course, he was a legend at Burnley. Kieran McKenna, he's still been at the club for almost 3 years and had unprecedented success with them. Okay, Russell Martin only been there a year. So again, that's another one that could be in trouble. Nuno only been there for 7 months, to be fair, but he had a fantastic spell at Wolves, right? He was made the Spurs manager at one point. There's a lot to him. He was Porto manager, I believe, at one point. You don't get jobs like this if you're really bad. Wolves, Gary O'Neill, only been there a year. That was maybe a surprise appointment, but done a good job. So that's why I could see them slip in. And then you got Steve Cooper, who's been in charge for 56 days. He's literally the freshest manager. Not his fault. That's just the reality of the situation. So, that definitely makes it troublesome. I do think as well is that he won't have credit in the bank. So I kind of feel that, let's say Enzo Maresca was still in charge and we lost the first 5 games of the season. Obviously, it depends on what the kind of score lines were. But I think that the club would still probably back him. Whereas I can see what you're saying, which is that, let's say Monday night we get absolutely twatted. What's the mood going to be? He's an ex-Forest manager as well. People, that's really not going to work against him. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can see it get toxic quick, not just because of Cooper and the results, but the lack of signings, paying £10 to watch a friendly, silence and Keenan Dewsbury Hall, and while we had to sell him, there's been a lot of negative, from the club's point of view, there's been a very lack of communication, and I think that could really come boiling to the surface if we go 3-0 down early. I can see it getting proper toxic. But look, the way I feel about Cooper, to sum it up, is when you're a kid, you know, you're down at the park, you're playing football with the lads, you have two lads start picking people one by one to be in their team, and there's that poor kid that's last and gets picked. That's Cooper, and that's how I feel about him. We were linked with everyone else, and then Potter kept putting us off, couldn't get Corbrand. God knows who else we interviewed, and it was just like, oh, you know what, we're stuck with Cooper now, and he was happy to take it. So very, very lack of ambition, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think it definitely does come across like that. It's I would say it's a less exciting appointment than when we got relegated, which is almost bizarre, if that makes sense. Maybe he feels a bit like Cloud Puel, if you remember him, just because that was another one that seemed like out of nowhere. Why are we getting him? And I think that the reason they brought Puel in at the time is they never intended for him to be the manager long term, but they thought he'd be a safe pair of hands for maybe 2 seasons. And then they would bring in the one that they really wanted, which was Brendan Rodgers. So maybe there's an element of that with Cooper. But you're right. It was really clear that they wanted Potter. And it made me laugh how when Cooper was appointed, they said he's categorically not second choice, which you might as well just put he categorically is second choice when you come up with an announcement with that. But look, I want to say, because like a lot of the Forest fans as well are saying, oh, you guys are so negative towards him. He's a really good guy. You need to give him a chance. We're going to give him a chance. We obviously are upset with what we've seen in pre-season. But I think you're right to say that the thing is that he is unfortunately going to be the victim of some circumstances beyond his control. And that is the fact that the club never should have got relegated. We've lost one of our best players who loves the club and came through the academy. Silence, all the things that you mentioned. And unfortunately, he's going to be the focal point of it, whether he deserves it or not. Because, you know, one thing I would say, and even in the pre-season friendlies, is that I do think that there were some odd things he did tactically and with the setup. But, you know, if Caleb Okoli is 70 yards upfield and not running back to defend, as a manager, what can you really do about that? You know, it's not just on the manager. But look, all that aside, let's kind of wrap this up then. Yeah, we're feeling like it's going to be a very tough challenge this season. I don't think that's a surprise. So we're going to go through our league predictions. So I'm going to start. I'm normally quite a positive person, but I think, unfortunately, as it stands, my prediction, I've gone for 19th. So I think probably Southampton will finish last, even though they won't have a points deduction. And I think that purely because they seemed, I think, a step down in the Championship compared to Ipswich and Leicester. They have signed some players, but I don't think they've really signed enough kind of killer players. They've got like Ben Brereton, Diaz, Cameron Archer, and they played for Sheffield United, who were awful last season. I think they could be good in a few years, and I think it's maybe part of their plan to sort of yo-yo a little bit. But I think they might finish below us. But after that, I think we're a better team than Ipswich, but we've had the rug pulled out from under us. And I think they're going to have the momentum with Kieran McKenna, which we have removed. And I think, you know, that's one of the damning things. I kind of felt like even if KDH was sold, but we kept Enzo, I'd be way more positive. I think I would have gone 17th in that case, even despite the transfers, you know. So it's just this kind of bad feeling and this kind of nasty smell that's lingering around the club, which is why I've gone for that. I just want to say I really hope I'm wrong. But I think if I compare this to the last time Leicester got promoted, which is when Nigel Pearson was in charge, you know, that season, we didn't make crazy signings. We signed Ojoa and we signed Cambiasso. Cambiasso was saucy, I'm not going to lie. He's out. You can't see it. He's on my back there. I'm really big fan of Esteban Cambiasso. And then we made some more signings in the January window. But I think there was just a much more positive vibe because we kept the manager, we kept the bulk of the team. We hadn't been in the Premier League for 10 years. Everyone was excited. Whereas this time round, we're coming into game one and I think The Athletic did a "How are you feeling?" index, and Leicester fans were the second most pessimistic. Funny enough, Chelsea were the most pessimistic, which is crazy. They've signed everyone in the world, but I can sort of understand why. So for that, I've gone for 19. But how about you, Luke? Where do you think we're going to finish?
I reckon us rock bottom, then Southampton 19th and 18th. I'll say this: I'm not sure the 18's an asterisk, but I do think Ipswich stays up. That's my 2 cents. But yeah, I think if Cooper stays in the whole season, RIP.
And what if we were to remove Cooper, though? Because, you know, that's one thing that maybe I saw this actually on the Championship podcast as well, where they explained that what teams and fans don't really take into account is there's been many cases where a manager's been removed halfway through the season and the team's form has completely been transformed. In fact, that's what happened with Steve Cooper at Forest when they went up. Or do you remember the season we went down? At one point, Aston Villa were rock bottom. They sacked Steven Gerrard. They bought Unai Emery, and 2 seasons later, they're in the Champions League. Insane. These things can happen. Look, what I will say is that I think if you look at our managerial shortlist, Steve Cooper, Championship experience. Graham Potter, Championship experience. Carlos Corberan, Championship experience. You're starting to see a bit of a recurring theme here, Luke. And
yeah, but Corbrand's ambitious. Like if this is what I mean by defeated. You say championship experience for Cooper, and let's say we keep him and we go down, and then let's say we hypothetically come up again. We're in the same position that we were in before, and we've lost money in the process. So this is what I talk about with a lack of ambition. I want someone that can take us to the next level and keep us up and then keep building upon that. Not let's just try and stay in the league by the skin of our teeth sort of thing and hope for the best the following season because you're in the same boat again. That's my opinion.
yeah, that's fair. And I think that's how Everton fans feel about Sean Dyche. Like he's done an amazing job keeping them in the division. But basically every single season is like you know what's going to happen. And what you really have much to look out for. It's like, will you achieve survival on game 38, 37, or 36? You know, it's that's basically all they can look forward to. And you don't really see that future building. But that Rome wasn't built in a day. So maybe there's something to be said there. But like, you know, my thoughts is that I wasn't particularly blown away by Steve Cooper. But even though, again, like I say, we've come across negative, I'll always give everyone a chance. And I really, really hope that come Monday or Tuesday, when we do a post-match show, that it's, you know, oh, wow, we've really been impressed. Even if, you know what, it was like a scumbag 0-0 draw where we didn't make any chances, we rode our luck, but we got something. I mean, it would still be a positive to take, in my opinion. As you say, though, I just fear that we get battered and it sets the tone for the season across. Look, Luke, is there anything else you'd like to say on our season predictions?
Yeah, mate, just to wrap it up, going about what you were saying, I would love to be wrong as well. I don't like being negative, and I would love nothing more than to come in here, and I will give him his roses if I am wrong. I will give the knee, I will apologize. But as it stands from what I'm saying, I'm just calling it how it is. I am worried, and I think that we need a deadline for when we take action if things don't go his way or our way. That's my thoughts, and my thoughts for that are 6 games and no more, no less.
Wow, we'll definitely have a catch up on 6 games and review how we're going. Okay, thank you everyone for watching. I hope you liked the show. Please like, subscribe, and comment. And we will see you most likely for our analysis on the first game of the season after we play Spurs. Until then, come on, Leicester. And this has been Fox Tech TV. Thank you and goodbye.